The galaxy was vast, filled with countless civilizations and empires that spanned thousands of star systems. Among them, the Thalzar Dominion reigned supreme. They were brutal conquerors, feared and respected by all who knew their name. Their warships were legendary, capable of erasing entire planets from existence. No one dared to challenge them. Not the Zarin coalition with their advanced technologies, nor the peaceful Drelans who preferred diplomacy over war. The Thalzar were unstoppable, or so they thought. When the Dominion set their eyes on a small, blue planet on the outskirts of their territory, they barely considered it worth the effort. Earth was primitive by their standards, its people insignificant. They sent a message to humanity, a simple demand for unconditional surrender. But the response they received was unexpected. It was not the plea for mercy they anticipated, but a single word. No. Admiral Carax of the Thalzar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Ravager of Stars, his crimson eyes narrowing as he replayed the message. The human who had sent it was bold, standing tall in a uniform of blue and white, a symbol of defiance emblazoned on his chest. His voice was firm, unwavering. "This is Admiral Ethan Cole of the United Earth Fleet. We do not bow to tyrants." Carax's claws tightened around the edge of his command console. Insolent creatures, he thought. How dare they defy the Dominion? He had reduced more powerful civilizations to ashes for less. Earth would be no different. "Prepare the fleet," he commanded, his voice cold as the void. "We will make an example of them." The Thalzar armada moved swiftly, thousands of warships converging on the Sol system. They came with the fury of a storm, ready to obliterate anything in their path. Planets trembled at the sight of their approach. Stars seemed to dim in fear. Yet as they reached the edge of the solar system, they found something unexpected. A single battleship, standing in their way. It was massive, sleek, and black as midnight, its surface shimmering with energy. It bore no markings, no symbols of surrender or fear, just a name etched boldly across its hull. UES Defiance. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Cole stood with his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the view screen. The Thalzar fleet filled the display, their numbers overwhelming. He knew the odds, knew that Earth's technology was centuries behind theirs. But retreat was not an option. Not today. "They're hailing us, sir," Lieutenant Ramirez reported, her fingers dancing across the console. "On screen," Cole ordered. Carax's image appeared, his face twisted in a mocking sneer. "You are brave, human, but foolish. Surrender, and I may grant you a quick death." Cole's expression didn't change. "Funny, I was about to say the same to you." Carax's laughter echoed across the bridge, cruel and condescending. "You think your pathetic ship can stand against my armada? You are outnumbered, outmatched." Cole's lips curled into a smirk. "Maybe. But we're human. We don't back down." He nodded to Ramirez, who tapped a command. The Defiance powered up, its engines roaring as its weapons systems came online. The ship hummed with energy, the sheer power radiating from its core, sending shivers through the hull. Carax's smile faded, his eyes narrowing. "You dare!" Cole cut the transmission. "Target the flagship. Fire." The Defiance moved with impossible speed, its cannons blazing as beams of pure energy tore through the void. The first volley slammed into the Ravager of Stars, its shields flaring under the impact. The second punched through, ripping into the hull and sending debris spiraling into space. Carax stumbled as his ship shook violently, alarms blaring. "What? How is this possible?" On the Defiance, Cole watched calmly as the Thalzar formation wavered, their confidence shattered. "They think they're gods," he muttered. "Time to remind them what humans do to tyrants." "Prepare the railguns," he ordered, his voice steely. Let's show them what Earth is made of. The battle had begun, and humanity's defiance echoed through the stars. The defiance surged forward, cutting through the void like a predator on the hunt. Its sleek design was a testament to human ingenuity, a perfect blend of speed, power, and resilience. As its railguns hummed with energy, Admiral Cole's gaze remained locked on the flagship of the Thalzar fleet. Fire! A burst of light erupted from the railguns, hurling projectiles at speeds nearing the edge of physics itself. They tore through space, smashing into the Ravager of Stars with unimaginable force. Armor plating crumpled, decks collapsed, and explosions rippled across the Thalzar warship's surface. On his bridge, Admiral Carax was thrown to the floor as his vessel shuddered violently. Sparks flew from shattered consoles, and the air filled with the acrid stench of burning circuits. "Shields failing!" shouted one of his officers, panic lacing his voice. "Weapons offline!" Carax's crimson eyes blazed with fury. "Impossible! How can one human ship do this?" But his question went unanswered, for the Defiance pressed its assault with unrelenting precision. It moved like no ship Carax had ever seen, dodging retaliatory fire with ease. Its speed was unreal, its firepower devastating. And most infuriating of all, its captain showed no fear. On the Defiance, Cole remained stoic, his crew executing his commands with military precision. They were outnumbered, facing an enemy that had conquered entire galaxies. But they were human, adaptable, tenacious, and fiercely determined. "Focus fire on their weapons arrays," Cole ordered. "We cripple their guns. They lose their bite." The Defiance fired again, beams of energy lancing out, striking the Ravager of Stars at its weakest points. One by one, the flagship's cannons fell silent, their power sources destroyed. Cole watched as the Thalzar formation faltered, confusion rippling through their ranks. Carax's second-in-command, Captain Valor, staggered to his side. "Admiral, our forces are disorganized. They don't know how to engage this thing." Carax's claws dug into the armrest of his chair, denting the metal. "Then I will show them how." He turned to his comm officer. "Order all ships to encircle it, overwhelm its defenses." The Dominion's fleet responded with ruthless efficiency, surrounding the Defiance from all sides. Swarms of fighters surged forward, their weapons lighting up the darkness as they unleashed a torrent of firepower. Cole's eyes narrowed. He had expected this. Deploy countermeasures. Engage the swarm protocols. The Defiance responded instantly, its hull shimmering as clouds of drones burst forth, intercepting the incoming fighters. Each drone was equipped with advanced targeting systems, moving with deadly accuracy as they shredded the Thalzar assault craft. Explosions bloomed like fireworks, debris scattering across the void. But the Dominion was relentless. Their warships fired volley after volley, the sheer volume of fire overwhelming the Defiance's shields. Sparks flew as impacts rocked the hull, metal groaning under the strain. "Shields at 60%, Ramirez shouted, her fingers flying over her console. "Hull integrity holding, but we can't take this for long." Cole's jaw tightened. He knew they were testing his defenses, looking for a weakness. But they would find none. Not today. Not while Earth still stood. "Prepare the arc cannon," he ordered, his voice calm. His crew hesitated, eyes widening. The arc cannon was experimental, its power unmatched but its stability untested. They had been warned never to use it unless absolutely necessary. But Cole's gaze was unwavering, his determination contagious. "Do it," he commanded. "Charge the arc cannon." Deep within the heart of the Defiance, the reactor core surged with energy, glowing with a light that defied darkness itself. Power conduits flared as the arc cannon charged, its hum growing into a roar that vibrated through the ship's frame. Carax watched the display on his screen, unease settling into his gut. He could feel the shift, the growing power that radiated from the human battleship. It was as if the very stars trembled in fear. "Admiral, that energy reading, it's off the charts." Vaylor's voice was shaken, his composure cracking. "No known weapon should have that kind of output." Carrax's arrogance wavered, replaced by a cold realization. This was no primitive race. These humans were dangerous. They were fighting for survival, for freedom, and they had just unveiled their trump card. "Order all ships to fall back," he shouted. "Get us out of range!" But it was too late. The arc cannon fired, a beam of pure energy erupting from the Defiance's prow, carving through space with a brilliance that dwarfed the stars. It tore into the Thalzar fleet, vaporizing warships in an instant, reducing their mightiest vessels to cosmic dust. The Ravager of Stars was struck directly, its shields shattering like glass. The beam pierced its hull, cutting through layer after layer of armor, slicing the ship in half. Explosions erupted from within, consuming the flagship as its reactors detonated in a chain reaction of destruction. Carrax's last thought was one of disbelief, his eyes fixed on the screen as the Defiance stood victorious, its form silhouetted against the wreckage of his once invincible fleet. On the Defiance, Admiral Cole watched the aftermath in silence. It was over. The Thalzar armada lay shattered, their dominance broken. But he knew this was just the beginning. Humanity had made a statement today. They would not kneel. They would not break. He turned to his crew, their faces worn but triumphant. "Set course for Earth," he ordered. "Let's go home." The journey back to Earth was filled with an eerie calm. The battle was over, but the weight of what they had just accomplished hung heavy on the crew of the Defiance. They had faced the most feared fleet in the galaxy and emerged victorious, defying all logic, all odds. But victory came with a price. As the ship glided through the darkness, the bridge was silent, each officer lost in their thoughts. They had seen friends die, comrades lost to the void. They had destroyed countless enemy ships, reduced entire crews to ashes. And while they had fought to protect their home, the cost of that protection was not easily forgotten. Admiral Cole stood at the viewport, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture rigid. He watched the stars streak past, their light a reminder of just how small they were in this vast universe. Yet, today, humanity had shown that even the smallest spark could burn the brightest. His reverie was broken by the voice of Lieutenant Ramirez. "Sir, incoming transmission from Earth Command. It's the President." Cole nodded. "Put it through." The screen flickered, and the face of President Eleanor Reed appeared. Her expression was tense, her eyes wide with relief. "Admiral Cole, reports are flooding in from across the system. Is it true? Did you really destroy the Thalzar armada?" Cole's jaw tightened. "Yes, Madam President. The Dominion's fleet has been neutralized. Earth is safe, for now." A breath of disbelief escaped her lips. "I can't believe it. You faced the might of the Thalzar and won with just one ship?" "It wasn't just a ship," Cole replied, his voice firm. "It was our people, our courage, our refusal to surrender." Reed's eyes softened. "You saved us all, Admiral. The world owes you and your crew a debt we can never repay." Cole shook his head. "We did what we had to. But the Thalzar won't take this lightly. They'll come back, and next time they'll be even more prepared. We need to be ready." The President's face darkened. "Agreed. We'll begin preparations immediately. New defenses, alliances, whatever it takes. Earth will not be caught off guard again." The transmission ended, and Cole released a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He knew the President was right. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The Thalzar were powerful, their reach vast. This was only the beginning. The Defiance continued its voyage home, its hull scarred but its spirit unbroken. Yet, as they neared Earth's orbit, something felt off. "Admiral," Ramirez spoke, a hint of unease in her voice. "We're receiving a distress signal from Luna Base." Cole turned sharply. "Luna Base? That's impossible. They're our first line of defense. Who's attacking them?" Ramirez's hands danced across her console, her face paling. "Sir, it's the Thalzar." A chill ran through the bridge. How? They had destroyed the fleet. They had seen the wreckage, the shattered remains of the Dominion's armada. How could they still be here? Cole's fists clenched. "Put it on screen." The view screen flickered, displaying the horrifying sight of Luna Base under siege. Thalzar warships surrounded the lunar outpost, their cannons firing relentlessly. Explosions rippled across the surface, debris scattering into the void. "No," Ramirez whispered. "They must have had a second fleet lying in wait." Cole's mind raced. The Dominion had anticipated their resistance. They had been ready for a counterattack. The fleet they had destroyed was merely the first wave, a test of humanity's defenses. And now, the real invasion had begun. "Helm, full speed to Luna Base," Cole barked, his voice steely with resolve. "Arm all weapons. Prepare for battle." The Defiance roared to life, engines blazing as it hurtled toward the moon. Cole's eyes burned with determination. He wouldn't let Earth fall. Not now. Not ever. As they approached the battlefield, the scale of the assault became clear. Hundreds of Thalzar warships filled the void, more than they had faced before. And at their center stood a behemoth, a massive dreadnought, twice the size of the Ravager of Stars, its hull bristling with weapons. Cole's heart sank, but he didn't hesitate. "Target the lead ship. We take out their command. We disrupt their chain of command." The Defiance fired, beams of energy slicing through enemy formations, tearing smaller ships apart. But the dreadnought remained unfazed, its shields absorbing the assault with ease. On board the dreadnought, Supreme Warlord Zalthor watched with a cold, calculating gaze. His scales glistened under the red light of his command chamber, his posture regal and composed. Unlike Carax, he was no fool. He had studied the humans, learned their tactics, their weaknesses, and he had come prepared. "Bring the nullifier online," Zalthor commanded, his voice like gravel. "Let's see how their precious battleship fares without its toys." The dreadnought's hull glowed ominously, energy rippling outward. A shockwave burst forth, spreading across space, washing over the Defiance. Ramirez's console flickered, her face draining of color. "Admiral, our systems, they're shutting down!" Cole's eyes widened as the lights dimmed, the hum of the engines fading. He could feel the ship's power waning, its weapons falling silent. The arc cannon dimmed, its energy cut off. "They're using some kind of energy dampener," Cole realized, his heart pounding. "They've neutralized our tech." The Defiance drifted helplessly as the Thalzar fleet closed in, their weapons primed and ready. Zalthor's voice echoed across the comms, cold and mocking. "You fought well, human, but your defiance ends here." Cole's jaw clenched, his mind racing. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and now defenseless, but surrender was not an option. It never was. "Emergency power to maneuvering thrusters," he ordered, his voice unwavering. "Prepare for evasive action. This fight isn't over." The Defiance struggled to life, its movements sluggish, but it refused to go down without a fight. Cole's eyes burned with defiance, his spirit unyielding. They may have taken his weapons, but they would never take his will. The Defiance lurched through space, its thrusters sputtering as it tried to evade the onslaught. The Thalzar fleet closed in, surrounding the battleship like predators circling wounded prey. Beams of energy tore through the void, narrowly missing as Cole's crew fought desperately to keep their ship moving. "Secondary power systems failing," Lieutenant Ramirez reported, her voice strained. "We're barely holding on." Admiral Cole gritted his teeth, his hands gripping the edge of his command console. The energy dampener had crippled them, neutralizing their advanced systems. The arc cannon was offline, the shields were collapsing, and their weapons were useless. But he refused to give in. "Keep us moving," he ordered, his voice firm. "They want us cornered. Don't give them that satisfaction." The Defiance twisted and rolled, dodging a barrage of enemy fire. Explosions flared around them, debris crashing against the hull. The ship groaned under the pressure, but it kept moving, defying the odds once again. On board the Thalzar dreadnought, Supreme Warlord Zalthor watched with a mixture of fascination and contempt. "Stubborn creatures," he muttered, his eyes narrowing. "They refuse to die, even when victory is impossible." His second-in-command, Commander Varak, stepped forward. "Should we finish them off, my lord?" Zalthor's lips curled into a sinister smile. "Number not yet. Let them struggle. Let them realize the futility of resistance." Varak bowed. "As you command." The Thalzar fleet tightened their formation, surrounding the Defiance on all sides. They fired in coordinated waves, their cannons lighting up the darkness, forcing the human battleship into a desperate dance. Inside the Defiance, the situation was dire. Consoles sparked, smoke filled the air, and injured crew members were being carried to the infirmary. The ship was barely holding together, its systems failing one by one. But Admiral Cole remained steadfast, his eyes burning with defiance. "Sir, we can't keep this up," Ramirez shouted over the chaos. "We've lost engines 3 and 4. We're running on fumes." Cole's mind raced. They were out of time, out of options. But he couldn't let Earth fall. He couldn't let humanity be enslaved by these monsters. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice low but resolute, "are the manual targeting systems still operational?" Ramirez hesitated. "Yes, but they're outdated, inaccurate. We haven't used them in years." Cole's gaze was cold as steel. "We don't need accuracy. We just need to make some noise." He turned to his weapons officer, Lieutenant Harris. "Target the debris field. Set the old fusion warheads to maximum yield." Harris's eyes widened. "Sir, that'll cause a chain reaction. The whole area will go up like a supernova." "Exactly," Cole replied, his expression unyielding, "and we'll be right in the middle of it." Realization dawned on his crew's faces. It was a suicide maneuver, a desperate gamble to take as many of the enemy with them as possible, but they were out of choices, and Cole would be damned if he went down quietly. "Do it," he commanded. "That's an order." Harris nodded, his face grim with determination. His fingers danced over the controls, manually locking on to the shattered remnants of destroyed ships. The fusion warheads armed, their timers set. Cole looked around the bridge, meeting the eyes of every man and woman who had fought by his side. "It's been an honor serving with you all," he said, his voice steady. "No matter what happens, remember that we stood our ground. We fought back." His crew straightened, saluting him with fierce pride. They were scared, but they were also resolute. They knew what was at stake. "Detonation in 60 seconds, Harris reported, his hands shaking but his voice firm. "It's been an honor, sir." Cole nodded. "Hold the line." For Earth. The Defiance slowed, drifting into the heart of the debris field, surrounded by the wreckage of countless ships. The Thalzar fleet moved in for the kill, their formation tightening, their weapons charging for the final blow. Zalthor watched, his confidence unwavering. "This is the end for them," he declared. "A futile effort like all the rest." But as the countdown reached 0, his eyes widened in horror. The debris field ignited, a chain reaction rippling through the wreckage. Fusion warheads detonated in a cascade of blinding light, each explosion feeding the next. The void itself seemed to burn as the supernova engulfed everything in its path. Thalzar warships were caught in the blast, their shields disintegrating, their hulls vaporized. Even the mighty dreadnought was rocked by the shockwave, its systems flickering as the energy overload surged through its circuits. On the Defiance, Admiral Cole watched the destruction unfold, his heart heavy but resolute. They had dealt a crippling blow to the enemy, taken hundreds of warships with them. But his ship was caught in the blast, the hull cracking, systems failing. "Admiral," Ramirez whispered, tears in her eyes. We're not going to make it, are we?" Cole's expression softened, his resolve unbroken. "Number. But we did what we had to. We fought back. We showed them that humanity won't be broken." The light consumed them, the bridge shaking as the Defiance began to break apart. Alarms blared, metal twisted, and the void beckoned. Cole closed his eyes, his last thought one of peace. They had stood their ground. They had fought to the end. And as the Defiance was engulfed by the supernova, its legacy echoed across the stars, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. Silence, vast, cold, and unforgiving. The aftermath of the explosion left a void in space, where once the Defiance had stood defiant against an empire. The supernova's light faded, revealing the wreckage of Thalzar warships scattered across the battlefield. They were broken, twisted, shattered by the fury of humanity's final stand. Yet, amidst the debris and cosmic dust, a faint signal flickered. Weak, intermittent, barely detectable. It was coming from the remains of the Defiance. Deep within the fractured hull, a small emergency pod clung to life, its systems struggling to function. Inside, Admiral Cole was barely conscious, his body battered and bruised. He could feel the cold seep into his bones, the life support system failing. But as he opened his eyes, he saw Earth in the distance, a blue and white marble floating peacefully against the stars. A tear slipped down his cheek. They had protected it. They had given everything to keep it safe. But was it enough? His calm crackled to life, a broken voice coming through. "Anyone? Copy? This is Luna Base. Heavy casualties. Enemy retreating. Defiance, do you read?" Cole's heart skipped. They had survived. Against all odds, Luna Base was still standing. But the cost, his crew, his ship, gone. With the last of his strength, he reached for the transmitter. "This is Admiral Cole," he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "The Defiance is down, but Earth is safe." A chorus of relief flooded the comms, voices cheering, crying, celebrating. He had given them hope, shown them that even the mightiest of tyrants could be challenged. But his victory was not without consequence. On board the Thalzar dreadnought, Supreme Warlord Zalthor staggered to his feet, his regal posture shattered by the force of the explosion. His command chamber was in ruins, screens shattered, circuits sparking. Yet, somehow, his ship still held together. Varric crawled to his side, his armor scorched, his face contorted in pain. "My lord, the fleet, it's gone. They destroyed us." Zalthor's eyes burned with rage, his claws curling into fists. "One ship," he growled, his voice dripping with disbelief. "One human ship did this?" His pride was wounded, his power diminished. The Thalzar Dominion had never known defeat, not until today, not until these defiant creatures had dared to challenge his rule. "They will pay," Zalthor hissed, his voice cold and venomous. "I will burn their world to ashes. I will make them suffer for this humiliation." Varric hesitated. "My lord, we barely escaped. Our forces are shattered. if we attack now." Zalthor's claw shot out, gripping Varric's throat. "We are the Thalzar. We do not retreat. We do not surrender. We will crush them, even if I have to raise every star system in this galaxy to do it." He released Varric, who collapsed, gasping for air. "Order the remaining ships to regroup," Zalthor commanded. "We will rebuild, we will return, and we will show these humans what it means to defy the Dominion." As the dreadnought limped away from the battlefield, Zalthor's eyes remained fixed on Earth, his hatred searing through the void. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Back on Earth, the news of the Defiance's sacrifice spread like wildfire. Monuments were erected, heroes honored, and Admiral Cole's name became legend. They called him the Defender of Earth, the man who stood against the darkness and gave humanity hope. But deep in the shadows, preparations were already underway. Scientists analyzed the data from the battle, engineers worked to reverse engineer the arc cannon, and soldiers trained for the inevitable return of the Thalzar. In a hidden bunker beneath the Andes Mountains, President Eleanor Reed stood before a council of generals and scientists, her face solemn. "Admiral Cole bought us time," she said, her voice firm. "But the Thalzar will come back, and next time, they won't underestimate us." A hologram flickered to life, displaying blueprints for new warships, advanced weapons, and planetary defenses. "We need to be ready. We need to be stronger, faster, smarter." She looked around the room, her gaze hard as steel. "We survived because we fought back, because we refused to kneel, and when they return, we'll show them that humanity does not break." The council nodded, determination radiating from their faces. Plans were set in motion, resources allocated, and alliances forged. Earth was no longer just a planet, it was a fortress. But even as they prepared for war, Admiral Cole's words echoed across the stars, a message of defiance that could not be silenced. "We don't bow to tyrants. We fight. We endure. We survive." The galaxy had been changed forever. The Thalzar Dominion was no longer invincible, and humanity had just begun to fight. Months passed since the Battle of Luna Base, but the scars remained fresh. Earth mourned the loss of the Defiance and its crew, their sacrifice remembered as the turning point in humanity's fight against the Thalzar Dominion. Statues were erected, stories were told, and Admiral Ethan Cole became a legend, a symbol of courage and defiance. Yet, amid the mourning, the war machine continued to turn. Earth's leaders knew the victory was temporary. The Thalzar would return, and when they did, they would come with a vengeance. Humanity needed to be ready. Deep within the Andes Mountains, hidden beneath layers of rock and reinforced steel, the United Earth Fleet Command operated day and night. The brightest minds from across the world worked tirelessly, designing new weapons, new ships, and new strategies. They called it Project Phoenix, named after the mythical bird that rose from its own ashes. President Eleanor Reed walked through the underground facility, her presence commanding respect and urgency. She moved with purpose, her steps echoing off the cold metal floors as she made her way to the heart of the operation. "Madam President," General Marcus Hayes greeted her, his salute sharp and precise. "We're ready to show you the prototype." She nodded, her eyes hard with determination. "Let's see it." Hayes led her into a massive chamber, its walls lined with monitors and workstations. In the center of the room stood a ship, sleek and deadly, its black hull shimmering with an otherworldly glow. It was larger than the Defiance, bristling with weapons and powered by technology unlike anything Earth had ever seen. "The UES Vengeance," Hayes announced, his voice filled with pride. "The most advanced battleship humanity has ever built." Reed's eyes widened as she took in the sight. How did you... Hayes's face darkened. We scavenged the battlefield, collected debris from the Thalzar wreckage. Our scientists were able to reverse engineer their energy-dampening tech. We turned their weapon against them. Reed stepped closer, her fingers brushing the cold metal. The vengeance pulsed with energy, humming with power. It was a war machine, designed for one purpose, to end the Thalzar threat once and for all. And the arc cannon? She asked, her voice low. Hayes hesitated. We improved it. It's more stable now, more powerful. But it comes at a cost. It drains the core almost entirely. It's a one-shot weapon. After that, we'll be defenseless. Reed's jaw tightened. Then we better make it count. As they stood before the vengeance, an alarm blared, red lights flashing across the room. A communications officer ran up, his face pale with fear. Madam President, General, we're receiving reports from Mars Colony. They're under attack. Reed's heart sank. The Thalzar? Yes, ma'am. They came out of nowhere, wiped out the defense grid in minutes. The fleet we faced before, it was just a scout force. The real invasion has begun. Her blood ran cold. How many? The officer's hands trembled. Thousands. Their numbers. We've never seen anything like it. Reed turned to Hayes, her eyes blazing. Get the vengeance ready. I want that ship in the air within the hour. Hayes hesitated. Madam President, the crew isn't fully trained. We've never tested the arc cannon in combat. We don't even know if... There's no time for tests, Reed snapped. If we lose Mars, they'll be on Earth next. We either fight now or we die. Hayes's face hardened. He understood. This was humanity's last stand. I'll assemble the crew, he said, his voice resolute. We'll be ready. As he turned to leave, Reed called after him. And General, find me a captain. I want someone who can finish what Admiral Cole started. Hayes paused, his eyes flicking to the memorial on the wall, a plaque bearing Cole's name and the names of his fallen crew. I think I know just the man. Meanwhile, on Mars, the situation was dire. The Thalzar descended upon the colony like locusts, their warships raining destruction from above. Buildings crumbled, defenses shattered, and civilians fled in terror. The sky burned with fire and smoke, the air filled with screams. Commander Alex Mason fought desperately to hold the line, his soldiers outmatched and outgunned. He watched in horror as his platoon was decimated, the Thalzar cutting through them without mercy. Fall back, he shouted, his voice hoarse. Regroup at the command center. We make our stand there. His men followed, their faces pale with fear. They had heard the stories, the legends of the Thalzar's brutality. But nothing could have prepared them for this. As they retreated through the ruins, Mason looked to the sky, his heart sinking. The enemy fleet was endless, stretching across the horizon. How could they possibly survive this? His comm crackled to life, a voice breaking through the static. This is United Earth Fleet Command to Mars Colony. Reinforcements are on their way. Hold the line. Mason's breath caught. Reinforcements? Could it be true? He looked up just in time to see a streak of light pierce the atmosphere, descending like a falling star. It moved with incredible speed, its silhouette dark and menacing. The UES Vengeance had arrived. Its cannons roared to life, beams of energy tearing through Thalzar warships, reducing them to molten slag. It moved with terrifying speed, weaving through enemy formations, its weapons blazing with fury. On board the Vengeance, General Hayes stood on the bridge, his face set with grim determination. All weapons free. Show these bastards what humanity can do. The crew responded with precision, firing volley after volley, pushing the Thalzar back. But it was not enough. Their numbers were overwhelming, their resolve unbreakable. Hayes knew what had to be done. He turned to his weapons officer. "Prepare the arc cannon." The officer's face went pale. "Sir, we're right in the middle of the colony. If we fire now—" Hayes's eyes were cold. "I know, but if we don't, Mars is lost." The arc cannon began to charge, its energy building to a crescendo. The air hummed with power, the ship trembling as the weapon reached maximum output. Hayes looked to the screen, his jaw clenched. Fire. The beam erupted from the Vengeance, cutting through space, obliterating everything in its path. The Thalzar fleet was vaporized, their ships torn apart in an instant. But the cost was high. The Vengeance went dark, its systems drained, its engines failing. It began to fall, spiraling toward the surface. On Mars, Commander Mason watched in horror as the battleship plummeted from the sky, a black shadow descending upon the battlefield. The Vengeance was powerful, but its power had come at a terrible price. The Vengeance plummeted from the sky, its once majestic form spiraling toward the Martian surface. Flames engulfed its hull as it tore through the atmosphere, engines silent, systems dead. It was a colossal titan brought low by its own power, a weapon too mighty for its own good. On the ground, Commander Alex Mason watched with horror as the battleship fell. Dust and debris clouded the air, the shockwave from the impact knocking him off his feet. He shielded his eyes, his heart sinking. This was supposed to be their salvation, their last hope. For a moment, all was silent. Then the ground shook as the Thalzar advanced, their forces regrouping, their war cries echoing across the battlefield. They had seen the fall of the Vengeance, and they were hungry for blood. Mason staggered to his feet, his face grim with resolve. "All units, fall back to the command center. We hold this line or we die trying." His soldiers rallied around him, their faces pale but determined. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but they were human. They would not go quietly. As they braced for the final assault, a low hum filled the air. Mason's head snapped up, his eyes widening. The Vengeance. It was moving. Amidst the wreckage, the colossal battleship began to stir. Its hull was battered, its armor scorched, but its heart still beat. Deep within its core, emergency power flickered to life, reigniting its systems one by one. On the bridge, General Marcus Hayes groaned as he pulled himself from the rubble. His body ached, his vision blurred, but he was alive. Around him, his crew stirred, coughing as smoke filled the air. "Report!" Hayes shouted, his voice hoarse. Lieutenant Park struggled to her console, her hands trembling as she checked the systems. We're still operational, sir. Barely. Weapons offline. Engines at 5%. Life support holding." Hayes's eyes narrowed. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He looked to the screen, seeing the Thalzar forces advancing on Mars colony, their weapons primed, their victory assured. "Number not today." "Can we move?" he demanded. Park hesitated. "Thrusters are functional, but we're dead in the water otherwise." Hayes's jaw tightened. "Then we'll crawl if we have to. Get us over the colony. We're their only shield now." The Vengeance groaned as it rose from the crater, its thrusters sputtering, its hull cracked and broken. But it moved. Slowly, painfully, but it moved. On the battlefield, Mason's soldiers stared in awe as the battleship loomed above them, its shadow shielding them from the oncoming assault. Hope flickered in their eyes. Maybe they weren't alone after all. Hayes stood tall on the bridge, his voice echoing through the comms. "This is General Marcus Hayes of the UES Vengeance. To all Thalzar forces, you shall not pass." The Dominion's warships hesitated, their formations faltering. They had watched this ship fall. They had seen it broken, defeated. And yet it still stood, defying them once more. Supreme Warlord Zalthor's face twisted in fury as he watched from his command ship. Impossible! That ship should be dust! His claws curled into fists. All units obliterated! Leave no trace! The Thalzar unleashed a storm of firepower, beams of energy and missiles raining down on the Vengeance. The battleship shuddered, its armor melting under the assault. Metal groaned, circuits fried, but it held. Inside, sparks flew as consoles exploded, crew members thrown from their stations. But no one fled. No one faltered. They stood their ground, just as Admiral Cole had taught them. Hayes's eyes burned with determination. All power to the shields. Protect the colony. The Vengeance absorbed the attack, its hull buckling, its systems screaming in protest. But it held the line. It stood as humanity's last shield, defying the darkness. Zalthor's rage was palpable, his face contorted with fury. Curse these humans, they refuse to die! His command ship moved forward, its cannons glowing with deadly energy. He would finish this himself. Hayes watched the screen, his heart pounding. They were out of time, out of power, but they still had one last weapon. The arc cannon, he said, his voice low. Park looked at him, her face pale. Sir, the core's depleted. It'll drain the last of our energy. We won't survive it. Hayes's expression was resolute. We were never meant to survive this. He looked around at his crew, at the men and women who had fought by his side. They won't get past us, not while we still draw breath. They understood. They saluted, tears in their eyes, faces full of pride. They were the last line of defense. They would not falter. Hayes turned to the screen, his gaze fixed on Zalthor's flagship. Charge the arc cannon. Target the command ship. All power to the weapon. The Vengeance shuddered as the arc cannon activated, energy building in its core. Lights flickered, consoles dimmed, and the air grew cold as every ounce of power was funneled into the weapon. Zalthor's eyes widened as the beam fired, a blinding lance of light tearing through space. It struck his flagship, shattering its shields, piercing its hull. The ship imploded, fire consuming it as it disintegrated. The Thalzar forces halted, their leader annihilated, their command shattered. They broke formation, fleeing in chaos, their resolve shattered. On Mars, Mason watched in disbelief as the invaders retreated, victory slipping from their grasp. They did it, he whispered. They saved us. But as the dust settled, the Vengeance hung motionless, its lights dim, its engines silent, its sacrifice complete. General Hayes stood on the darkened bridge, his body numb, his vision fading. He felt peace, a warmth spreading through him as he whispered, "For Earth." And then, the Vengeance was no more, a ghostly silhouette against the stars. But its legacy endured, its defiance echoing through the cosmos. Humanity had stood its ground. Humanity had fought back, and in their defiance, they had found victory. The war was far from over, but the Thalzar had learned a lesson they would never forget. Humans did not kneel. Humans did not break. They rose from the ashes, fiercer and stronger than before, and no one dared to challenge them again.